Welcome back to the program. Reactions continue to pour in with major stakeholders calling for peace amid the court's judgment. Now, because joining us, good morning once again, and you may already know that a federal high court in Abuja has sentenced Nnamdi Kanu of the separatist group Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, to life imprisonment upon his conviction on the offense of terrorism. Now, Justice James Omotosho, while concluding his judgment on Kanu's trial on Thursday, sentenced him to life imprisonment in relation to counts 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 of the 7-count charge in which he was prosecuted by the Department of State Services instead of the death sentence. Now, for count 3 relating to the offenses of belonging to a proscribed terrorist group, Justice Omotosho sentenced him to 20 years imprisonment without an option of fine. On count 7, of course, bordering on the unlawful importation of a radio transmitter for the purpose of furthering the clandestine activities of Radio Biafra, which is not registered in Nigeria, the judge sentenced him to 5 years imprisonment without an option of fine. The judge, who noted that Kanu had been unruly all through the trial, said he allowed the court to sentence him to death for terrorism offenses, but that being the judge as a Christian, he chose to be merciful to the defendant. Justice Omotosho also ordered that the defendant be kept in protective custody in any part of the country, but not in Kuje prison, Abuja, and that the radio transmitter be forfeited to the federal government. Now, right outside the court, we saw counsel to the prosecution and the defendant, of course, make some statements reacting to the court's verdict. Take a look.
Now, gentlemen of the press, you know, since we started this trial, I refrain from speaking to you as pressmen because the profession does not allow me to discuss with you what happened in the words of the court. The profession does not allow me to tell people what happened in court. But today, we have come to a final end. Justice has been done. And therefore, Nigerians must, one way or the other, appreciate the judiciary. You remember just last Monday, the president was saying, at any time when Nigeria is in a big trouble or fix, judiciary has always come to the aid to salvage Nigeria. Again, the judiciary has salvaged Nigeria from the claws, from the oppression of the proscribed IPOB. The court has also pronounced death sentence on Eastern Security Network, which was the military wing of IPOB. Today, God has brought an end to injustice, oppression, suffered by our brothers and sisters of the eastern states of Nigeria. They will now be able to sleep with their two eyes closed. What is important is that every Nigerian must consider issue of security as his personal business. When you look away, when you compromise, or when you show fear, you are encouraging the miscreants, the vandals, the criminals, the terrorists to fester. This issue ought not to have festered for that long. Nigeria is our own country. We have no other country we can call our own. Secondly, it is our responsibility as Nigerians to help the government by way of information. You had during the trial information concerning how several heads of human skull were used to bury a scandal, somebody who is a criminal. Some just because people were afraid. We all must be courageous enough to confront terrorism, criminality, and all sort of things. I know that political insinuations or perspective will be put into this matter. I was in court in there when somebody was saying, oh, Yoruba, oh, Hausa, oh, Igbo. We are all Nigerians. We must love one another. We must not compromise the security of the country on the basis of those primordial sentiments. So I congratulate Nigeria today for seeing the end of this, and let it be a warning to those who may think they are bigger than Nigeria. Nigeria is bigger than every one of us. The law is bigger than every one of us. And the law will take its course to deal with miscreants, to deal with terrorists, to deal with criminals. You know, all of us are victims when we keep quiet. All of us are victims when we don't do what we ought to do. Therefore, let everybody be a Nigerian.
Forever living in infamy. Today is the only day I have witnessed a man being convicted for mere puffery, for what he said from his mouth, not what he did with his own hands. The verdict is not consistent with the evidence laid before the court. The sentence is overbroad, cruel, and unusual. How can you convict a man for making mere broadcasts from a location that was never named, and he never tied that broadcast to any single incident of violence, or even someone slapping someone, not to talk of terrorism? He did all this. He didn't lay any evidence. I don't know where this whole verdict can be grounded in law, logic, or facts. We disagree with the judgment vehemently, and we are going to fight it from here onwards until justice is done.
There's no justice here. That's why
the judgment is not based on law. It's not based on facts. It's based on politics. It's based on some tribal, primordial sentiments. Just because Nnamdi Kanu is Igbo, an Igbo man has become the person in Nigeria that should be trampled upon. I'm not saying this because I'm Igbo. I'll say it for the Hausa or Yoruba who gets trampled upon. But today we saw an Igbo man being trampled upon, and by God Almighty, we are not going to allow it. It will not stand. Nobody is going to trample on me. Nobody is going to trample on Nnamdi Kanu. Nnamdi Kanu is not a terrorist. He's a man that was pursuing change. To pursue a separate nation of yours is not a crime. So in Nigeria today, if somebody says, don't be silly, you get convicted. Nnamdi Kanu may broadcast, and so.
I mean, of course, those are reactions from right outside the courtroom. I mean, you're seeing that the Aloy Ejimakor, the consultant to Nnamdi Kanu, of course, former member, his lead counsel actually has vehemently rejected the judgment of the court. And of course, they do plan to go ahead and seek legal redress at the appellate court. Joining us now to discuss this judgment and what it means for the Southeast region is also Igbonekwu Ogazimorah, who is, of course, the editor-in-chief, SBS Great Interviews, and an attorney at law. Thank you, also.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The first question I have for you also this morning is Nnamdi Kanu a terrorist?
No. I do not think he's a terrorist. That is, if you understand terrorism. The reason I do not think he's a terrorist is that, just like Ejimakor mentioned, his objectives are known and they do not tend to terrorism. He is pursuing change in the system. He wants a separate nation. And even my Lord, Justice Omotosho, mentioned Article 20 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It is a right belonging to anybody to seek self-determination if the person has the reason to do that. Now, if you recognize that law, you now put it side by side with the declaration of IPOB as a terrorist organization. IPOB has said it is pursuing self-determination, which is accepted in law. You remember that when the Buhari administration outlawed IPOB by declaring it a terrorist organization, the United States Embassy said they do not see IPOB as a terrorist organization. Rather, they saw it as an organization pursuing change and freedom of their people from Nigeria. Now, when you say freedom of the people from Nigeria, the question that should come to mind is this: why is everybody actually seeking, or somebody actually seeking out of Nigeria? It is a system failure. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we do not always go for the root causes of issues. This issue of new agitation for Biafra was pointed out April 1970 by General Philip Effiong. Immediately after the war, he was held in Lagos, but with a measure of freedom. And he granted an interview. And he said, the ingenuity I have seen of the Igbo in the course of this war is the reason I'll call on the federal government to handle the end of this war with utmost care. Because if the Igbo are ill-treated, their children will fight again. Immediately that statement was published, he was now detained until July 1970 before he was released. And what was he talking about? All the things he feared came to fruition. Number one, the federal government orchestrated the seizure of Igbo property in Rivers State, in Port Harcourt, allowing the likes of Kensarawiwa, using Port Harcourt Municipal Council to appropriate the property of the Igbo in Port Harcourt. And they made a municipal law that if anybody should pay £200 into the Port Harcourt Municipal Treasury, that person would have been deemed to have lawfully purchased an Igbo property which they are occupying, the so-called abandoned property. Now tell me, by any logic in this world, you declare somebody's property abandoned when the person was fleeing from a war that would have led to his death. You seized his property, and you now imposed yourself, made an offer, and there was acceptance, and you sold somebody's property. Then in 1978, the federal government now made a decree number 59, now lifting that particular law and said it was proper if somebody had paid £200 into the Port Harcourt Municipal Treasury. That was one, and that was how the Igbo lost their property after the war. Thousands of people died because of that policy. Then you had this policy of £20. You now said all the money somebody had in the bank, the person would have only £20 out of it. You confiscated the rest. So many people died because of that. Their children back to square one, suffering, coming up, some failed to come up, many died. Now you had the policy of indigenization, which you carried out excluding the Igbo entirely, 1972, 1974, 1976. Then, in present time, you designed a national railway and they excluded the entirety of the East. The very people that were active, when the colonial masters were setting the railways, they set it for their economic reasons. They set it from Kanu to Port Harcourt to lift produce. Groundnut from Kanu, from the north, going to the port, either Port Harcourt or Lagos. All the other produces from the northeast area, that's Maiduguri, going to Lagos or Port Harcourt. The economic reason. Now you have the same people who are known as actively mobile people and functional in an economy. You excluded them from the national railway program entirely. So many people in this southeast will live and die without ever knowing what a train is. Because they ran the other train aground, the other rail system, they ran it aground. Many people are coming up from the 80s when the railways started getting bad till this date. That is 40-something years. So many people have gotten to 40-something years. They haven't seen a moving train. They haven't even seen the use of the rail tracks. And that is why people are stealing the rail tracks, taking the knots, taking the sleepers, and the rest of them. Now, what leads to agitation? Agitation is because I am not satisfied with the system. You compelled me to be part of Nigeria. We are not in the age of slavery, where you have conquered me and you have taken me. We are in the age where every person has a stake. And why is my stake not factored in all the planning, in dispensation of national goods, national wealth? Because of that, you have a belt, huge belt of unemployed youth. When you have that, what do you expect?
All right, also, many people understand the points you're making. The Southeast has been marginalized. The federal government, to address the root causes of this feeling that people want to leave Nigeria, they want a separate state, they want to leave. But some people have also called into question the approach of Nnamdi Kanu. Also, do you fault Nnamdi Kanu's approach in trying to agitate for a separate state of Biafra?
Let me tell you this. In international law, there is a theory or principle called uti possidetis juris. As in simple English, it means leave it as it is. It's talking about the colonial boundaries. You should not touch the colonial boundaries. That is where they anchor the argument that self-determination should be within the country. You can pursue economic self-determination, cultural self-determination. That's where they narrowed it. Seeking separate state comes by one of two ways: constitutive or declaratory. What happened in 1967 was declaratory. Ojukwu declared Biafra, unilateral declaration, and then the federal government opposed it, and there was war. When they say constitutive, you come about it by the law. You follow the constitution. Now, has the federal government accepted to follow the constitutive principles? When you talk about referendum, yes, it is not in the constitution per se, but when you extrapolate, you can pick it in various laws in Nigeria. So if the federal government refuses to accept that, to use the policies of government, that referendum, you are leaving people with no option than to resort to self-help. I'm not saying self-help is the best. But when you refuse, you insist that there is no referendum in the Constitution and that you are not going to carry out any referendum. In our history, there was referendum. In 1963, there was referendum to determine where the Western Cameroon was going to go towards independence. And that referendum, which they call a plebiscite, was conducted. Northwestern Cameroon voted to join Nigeria. That is why you have the map of Nigeria as it is. While the southwestern Cameroon voted to remain with Cameroon. Right? So it was not even strange. It has been in practice. So Nnamdi Kanu's approach of making so many utterances, yes, that's if you look at it from moral angle, yes, many of them are very bad. Like calling for the death of somebody, attacking a whole ethnic group. But then, these are words of mouth. A justice system in the advanced world, especially the criminal justice system, harps on ability. It's not enough for me to say, I am going to Washington to slap Donald Trump. There has to be the ability. Can I do it?
Right.
Can I do it? That is the advanced criminal justice system. But here you say, I'm going to slap President Tinubu. You are arrested. And then you are detained.
So then, if Nnamdi Kanu is not a terrorist, what is he in your view?
Whether he was...
If you say, no, he's not a terrorist,
yes.
Then what is he?
Yes, I say he's not a terrorist.
So what is he?
He is an agitator. He's an agitator. He's agitating for what had proven to be the interest of his people because of deprivations, because of marginalization, because of selective actions. Now, when you talk about terrorism, you can't say terrorism here and you say criminality there. Boko Haram had seized a part of Nigeria for more than 15 years, held it, and they were governing it. Bandits are seizing many parts of Nigeria, held it, and they are governing it. What is worse in treason than that?
Thank you, Ozo. We're out of time, but you've said so many strong things this morning, as always. Thank you for your time. We have to call it a wrap for this segment, but I'm sure this conversation will continue during the week, of course. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
I mean, the questions are unending, but unfortunately, I mean, we broadcast, time is of the essence, and time is basically what we don't have anymore. But I would have loved to keep this going. We'll go on a quick break now. When the morning show returns, we'll be segueing into other areas. Of course, it is also Friday, and we don't want to leave you with your heart in hand. So, I didn't say heart, I said your heart in hand. So let's go on this quick break. When we come back, we'll look at other issues. Do stay tuned.